What is up? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back and welcome into another edition of the Jay and Sir Monday podcast, little Memorial Day special for you guys. We are going to break down the past road trip for the Mariners, which they went 4-6 on a little East Coast swing. We'll talk about some of the roster moves that might be coming up with Jorge Polanco's hamstring injury, some of the roster moves they've made with the bullpen. We'll talk about the upcoming series with the Astros, and we're a third of the way through the season, so we'll discuss the team in general a little bit. All of MarinersSUR's info will be linked in the description down below. Go follow him on Twitter X if you haven't already. How you doing today, my friend?
Doing well. Nice to have a Monday off. So, hoping the Mariners can provide a win as well. So, doing well. Thanks for having me on again.
Always, anytime. And yeah, same. I had kind of a half day today, so nice to be able to get home and watch some, afternoon Memorial Day baseball. I wish every team was playing today. I feel like that's a day that MLB should have every team on. And yeah, I think coming off this, we'll dive into this road trip for the Mariners here. They go 4-6. They win 1 out of 3 in Baltimore. They split in New York. I think we all kind of agree with that. We'll talk about those 7 games first. I think that's fine. Listen, I'd love to win the series in Baltimore. I know you would too. I'm never going to stand here and tell anybody, oh, just be happy with 1 out of 3. But I think in general, going on the road to Baltimore, New York, and going 3-4 is fine.
Yep, I completely agree there. I think going in, I knew it was the toughest road trip we would likely face all season. Both teams were playing well. So, yeah, I was happy with 3-4. Like you said, you'd always like to get more, but I think 3-4 is more than an acceptable result there through those 7 games in 2 cities.
Yeah, and I think with that Yankees series, again, sure, after winning the first 2, would I have loved to sneak in another one and win that series? 100%. I'm sure you're in the same boat. But if you take a step back and just look at that series as a whole and go, the Mariners split, totally fine. No problem with it. Now, we did get into the Washington series this past weekend, and the Mariners do lose 2 out of 3. Some frustrating games on Friday, Saturday. Luckily, I shouldn't say luckily, but fortunately, they salvage game 3 of the series to leave a little bit better taste in our mouths. And I think coming into this homestand with the Astros, had they been at 500, it just would have felt a little frustrating. So I thought a really nice win yesterday. What were your thoughts on the series versus Washington?
Yeah, going into that series, I think I made a couple posts of, I was a little bit concerned going in. I was surprised when, just kind of doing a little opponent research and, Washington, I think they were 5th in Fangraphs pitching F4. And that was split pretty evenly between their rotation and bullpen. The rotation, a lot of that is attributed to Mackenzie Gore is really good, lefty upper 90s, really good breaking stuff. And then Trevor Williams has had an amazing year as well. So I was just kind of concerned of okay, we're going to face 2 pitchers that are throwing really well. And then their bullpen, I think Floro came in on a 20-inning scoreless streak. Hunter Harvey's probably one of the better relievers in baseball. Then Finnegan had a sub-2 ERA. So I was more concerned after looking at that than I was initially. All right, these guys can really pitch the ball. And that's what turned out to happen in the first 2 games. Not to make excuses. I think that's still a series you should go in and take 2 of 3. But facing Gore and Williams was a little bit unfortunate. I think if we don't face both of them, a good chance we do come away with 2 of 3. But I think the frustrating part was just those losses were kind of a microcosm of some of the issues a lot of people have with the team. And it's hitting, having massive stretches of not looking competitive at all. The 7th inning, the bullpen in particular has become a huge issue. We saw that shine very brightly in this series. It was a very, very frustrating series. I think there were some coaching decisions that kind of made me scratch my head. And yeah, it's just, you're going to drop series to bad teams. But I think the way it unfolded was very frustrating. If you go lose, game 8-5 where you hit well, maybe it's a little bit less frustrating, but just some of the issues the team has had really, really, like I said, shine brightly in the series. So I think it really made it frustrating. But like I said, Washington's been able to pitch the ball very, very well. So I'm not super surprised, but at the same time, and I think Trevor Williams too, I would not have been surprised if he went 5 innings, 2 runs, but it was the way that unfolded with 8 strikeouts. It's just, he's not a strikeout pitcher. If we go out and he induces soft contact, that's what he's done in a lot of the starts. But with him going out and punching out 8, it was frustrating. That's not how he's had his success. And so, Yeah, I think I share a lot of the frustration with a lot of the fans in that series, but I will say I was concerned that it could be more challenging than people realize heading into it as well.
Yeah, I do think that, and that's a great point on Trevor Williams. That was kind of my thought too. It's just another pitcher we had to read that a career high in strikeouts through 3 2/3 against the Mariners. But I kind of came out of it the same way. I didn't get to watch a ton of the series outside of Sunday, but Washington pitching was better than I thought going in. They weren't a team I was able to do a series preview on, but Mackenzie Gore and Trevor Williams are good. I mean, you mentioned the guys at the back end of their bullpen. It's solid. And what were they able to do? They were able to get it to those guys by having a lead through 6, 7 innings. And, I used to kind of use the analogy with, when I talk my videos, like if the Mariners had Felix Hernandez going in 2012, you could beat a lot of teams because Felix goes 7. Then, yeah, you got some guys at the back end of the bullpen that could lock it down, and wins came a lot easier for the team when you have a pitcher like that going versus Patrick Corbin, who is awful, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term. No offense to him, but and the Mariners were able to get some, runs off of Corbin. And yeah, I think to your point, I think it was just a lot of how it happened. I think the fact that all this kind of came after winning 2 games in Yankee Stadium to start the series, and then it kind of just seemed all undone. I made the point in my video, I think on Saturday, that, if the Mariners were sitting there with like the Phillies record or something, I'd throw these games away pretty quickly. It happens. It's baseball. And I really do think that's just, you're going to lose some series like this, but the team just hasn't really taken off yet. So those losses just become more frustrating, I think, for the fan base. And then for myself included, I was frustrated Friday, Saturday. I think we were DMing a little bit on Saturday. I was sitting by the pool and I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like
Yeah.
just the way the game went. You did bring up some questionable managerial decisions. I'll let you expand on that a little bit. I agree with you. And I've been a pretty big defender of Scott's service for the most part. I think that the players got to play. And I'm not too critical of like who he's brought in out
Yeah.
of the bullpen. I think right now the bullpen's kind of a mess. And outside of Munoz, you pick your poison a little bit. So I haven't been too critical there, but I think taking Logan Gilbert out after 6 innings was a mistake. Now, listen, if the offense isn't going to score, it's not going to matter. Let me get that out of the way very quickly. And I think you probably agree with me there. Like if you can't score more than 1 run, it's not going to matter. I don't think they necessarily lost the game because of that. But was that one of the moves you were talking about with some of the questionable decisions this weekend? Taking
Yeah,
Logan
for
out?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and who knows, maybe it was super hot out and Gilbert went to Scott and said, hey, I'm gas. And we don't know that. But I know even like when this stretch of 17 games and 17 days started, I kind of thought that like yesterday, so Sunday, would have been a perfect day. Emerson Hancock threw for Tacoma. And I was like, that would be a perfect day to put Hancock in and give everybody an extra day rest. And that my main concern on that was that they were going to manage innings with everybody taking 3 turns through the rotation. 2 people have to take, I think, 4 turns without that extra day off. And so that's just where like I thought it would have made a lot of sense, because I think if they do that, unless there was something going on that we're not aware of, I think Gilbert would have went back out for the 7th. I think they're trying to manage innings in this long stretch, but it's like you have this capable starter in Hancock. I think throwing him against Washington is a perfect spot for it. He should be able to go 5 innings, 2, 3 ones, whatever it may be. So I just kind of wonder if they would have done that. Would Gilbert have went his 100 innings and maybe another inning or 2 in that game? And then, we'll get into this week, but I'm a little bit, concerned about like how will our starters throw this week, taking their 3rd turn without that extra day off. And I'm like, I kind of wish they all would have had that extra day leading into this week. And I hope that's not what it turns out to be. But yeah, I agree. Who is he to go to in the settling for a while? So I didn't love him coming in. I thought that maybe should have been like a Stanek spot, but then you look at what happened yesterday to Stanek. So it's just nobody's throwing well in the bullpen right now. So that's where it's tough. And I agree, you can't go ask your starters to go 7 innings every single game because they are going to get burnt out. But at 75 pitches, and Gilbert at this point is a veteran in the league, I think he was capable to go. And even if you hold him to 90 pitches, it's still kind of a reduction in his workload by 10 to 15 pitches. And so I just thought they maybe went a little bit too far and being conservative there, and it came back to bite them.
Yeah, and I respect what this team does with their starting pitches. Like, I had no issue taking Brian Wu out. Yet now
Yeah.
I thought it was a little weird that they had him start the inning. He gives up a bunt single and kind of a opposite field hit, and then he's done. I thought that was a little odd, but for the most part, I get being careful with Brian Wu, the injury history, everything
Yeah.
going on. Like you just said, Logan Gilbert's a veteran now. He's been around for a while. And neither of us are asking Logan to go out there and throw 130 pitches or anything like that, and I'm with you. I think listen, DC this time of the year is brutal. I 100% understand that. So I don't think it's like, oh my gosh, how stupid could you be to do this? But it just seems like in that spot with how this bullpen is going, that man, 95 pitches, you're asking Logan for 95 maybe. And then if you can win that game, who knows? Maybe they would have. I wonder maybe, and I know they planned these things out, but maybe one of the reasons they didn't go to Hancock yesterday is they felt they really needed that win. And they decided, like, listen, we don't want to risk this and get swept in this series, fall back to 500. So it all has sort of the, butterfly effect essentially a little bit. And yeah, to your point with who they're bringing in, I mean, that I just don't envy Scott's decisions at all.
Yeah.
I do have one thing I'll bring up and I'll get your take on it, but yeah, I was the same thing. I'm like, go to Stanek. Stanek's your best option right now. Well, they go to Stanek yesterday and almost gives up a grand slam to Winker, then gives up the home run to Abrams. You could have gone to Saucedo, I guess, not Saturday, but yesterday or something. Yeah. But, even there, I like Taylor Saucedo. I don't think he's necessarily an elite level reliever. He's probably your second best right now, maybe in that bullpen. What's your thoughts? One of my takes yesterday, and I'm not, I wouldn't call it a hot take or anything, but just a thought. In that seventh inning, 4-1, Washington had 2 on, nobody out. What's your thoughts about using Andres Munoz in those spots? Let's say Munoz gets out of it. It's 4-1. You go to Voth in the 8th and Stanek in the 9th with a 3-run lead. I talked about on my channel, a 3-run lead really is not as high leverage with nobody out, with nobody on base. Your win probability is probably over 95% at that point. Not saying we've seen 3-run leads blown, but what's your take on maybe getting just really creative here and using Munoz in those tight spots and then, kind of hoping you add on runs and using somebody else later?
I think it's worth a shot, and it's something they've done in the past quite frequently. Granted that they've had people like Brash that are also going well, so it's a little bit easier to do. But I mean, the 7th inning has been such an issue for them that I think it's something they should seriously take a long, hard look at. Is like using Munoz. If it's a 1-run game, it's a middle of the order at that point. There's not many guys you trust right now, so why not go to Munoz there? Try to get a shutdown 7th, and the 8th, bottom of the order, you go to somebody like Voth, however you pronounce that. And then, you hope you can add on. And then the 9th, you go to somebody like Stanek or Saucedo, whatever it may be. So I think it's worthwhile for them to take a long, hard look at that, just to kind of, try to stem those issues in that 7th inning in particular. And then, if you blow it in the 9th, it opens up another conversation, but there's just been so many issues in that spot in the game. I think maybe that is something you really have to consider to kind of try to break that issue. So I think they seriously should. And, I think Stanek has closed out a game or two this year and he's looked pretty good. And I feel, mostly fine with him. It's, I think they should seriously consider it because you're holding Munoz back right now. And there's oftentimes now that you're not even able to use him because the game's just getting away or you're losing a lead at that point. So I completely agree that it's something they need to take a long, hard look at.
Yeah, I think you just look at like the leverage situations now, and to your point, like, that happens and Stanek blows it in the 9th or something. Yeah, it opens up another can of worms. And I think a lot of it's just this bullpen isn't great right now. You've lost 2 of the best relievers in the American League. But if you look at it from a leverage standpoint, the last 2 games, the highest leverage spots were in the 7th inning. And I have no problem with them using Munoz in the 9th yesterday, even with a 4-run lead. Get the W, get out of there. Totally fine. But Munoz was used in an extremely low leverage situation yesterday at the end of the day. And your highest leverage at bats went to Ryan Stanek and Austin Voth against the Nationals, which again is going to happen. You can't use Munoz every time. And again, I'm not even like mad at Scott for how he managed it. It's a tough situation right now. But I think, it would be worth it to maybe get a little creative with it and see what you can do with Munoz pitching another innings. And then, maybe the offense adds on a few runs or something and, you're up 7-1 and now you can use those Kirby Sneeds and those guys to finish out those games. So it's a tough situation, but that does lead me into kind of the next thing to talk about is some of the roster moves with the bullpen. Jake and I from Raise the Trident talked about it a little bit yesterday, but a couple weeks ago they DFA Tyson Miller, which in a vacuum I get it, and I don't think I'm going to look back on this season and go, wow, we really missed Tyson Miller. That was the difference. But now you look at it and they option Edward Bizzardo and they aren't willing to DFA Kirby Sneed. And it just seems odd that they're willing to DFA Miller and not Sneed. And then now you got 3 lefties in the bullpen. What's your take on this kind of roster churn on the bullpen?
Yeah, and I tried to articulate this on Twitter the other day, and I agree. It's just usually I can kind of follow along with the moves they make. But yeah, when they DFA'd Miller, I didn't understand it because I was like, you have Cody Bolton who has an option left. Miller at that time had thrown the ball pretty well. You heard reports out of the organization that like, hey, this guy, we really like him. He kind of reminds us of Paul Sewald.
Mhm.
Like I said, his results had been good to that point. So when they did that, I was like, what are we doing? Why not just send Bolton down to Tacoma? You can keep everybody on your 40-man together. And then all of a sudden you lose Miller. So you lose a functional reliever off the 40-man. But I get it. Sometimes you want to have relievers that are optionable on the 26-man roster. So if they're overused, you can get a fresh arm up. So I understand where they're coming from. I didn't necessarily agree because if that happens, you could always DFA Miller 2 to 3 weeks down the road and you're in the same position. So I didn't really understand the move, but yeah, I could kind of see it. And then yesterday they keep Snead on board. And it's like the thought process to me was it's not an alignment on both those moves. And I feel like in both cases, because I thought that Miller was a better bet to get outs than Bolton. And then I think Bizzardo is probably a better bet to get outs than Snead, especially because you already have 2 lefties on the roster with Saucedo and Spire. So it's kind of like, where do you even use Snead? Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm both of them kind of made me scratch my head. And, if they would have in both instances went with keeping the optionable reliever on the roster, it's a little bit harder to pick apart, but, both decisions kind of contrasted each other. So, yeah. And Miller's throwing the ball very, very well for sure. I think he's 5 or 6 innings, no runs, like 5 or 6 strikeouts. And so he's one of those guys where if you had on the roster right now, he's probably the one that's in that 7th inning role. So yeah, it kind of makes, I don't quite know what they're doing there. But hopefully I'm sure they know what they're doing. They've been very, very good at this over the years. And we're still dealing with a small sample size, with Snead and what Miller's doing in Chicago. But yeah, I wish they would have went the other way. And, but here we are, and hopefully, Snead can get out for us moving forward. And it's kind of a moot point, but we'll see on that.
I think one of the things, and I thought you made some great points there with it, and it's just kind of baffling, but I do think one thing that I'll throw in there that I think sort of monkey in the wrench for them, when they DFA'd Miller, I think Gabe Spire was still, I think he had one rough outing before they DFA'd Miller. I really think the drop off of Gabe Spire has messed them up. I wouldn't be shocked, like if we had Jerry on right here, and I mean, candidly asked him without, just, hey, being 100% honest, he'd probably say we wouldn't DFA Tyson Miller. Knowing what we know now, I can almost guarantee you he'd be like, we would have kept him. But then Spire dropped off, and I think that really threw a wrench into it. I think that's why they're keeping Kirby Snead. I mean, it's weird. Like I think Spire has options, and I don't even think you should send Spire down. Truthfully, on Saturday, he was honestly, I thought, babbipped a little bit. It's just frustrating though, because it's all compounded together to be frustrating. But thoughts on that? I think that's really been the monkey in the wrench for them is Gabe Spire's drop off. I don't want to say it's confused them, but I think they're not really sure how to handle this. I imagine we're going to see Spire pitch in some very low leverage situations. Saucedo's probably your number 1 lefty right now. And I imagine when Spire's back, that's probably going to be the end for Kirby Snead. What's your thought on that? I think that's kind of the biggest, monkey in the wrench here.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point. That you're probably right. That they're right. We need to get Gabe Spire into low leverage, and so if there's an instance where and he's coming off an injury, so he maybe can't even go back to back, and so that could be the kind of the decision there is that all right, we need to have Snead on board if it's at 6th, 7th, 8th inning close, and there's a pocket of lefties. We're not going to go to Spire in a close game right now, and if Saucedo's not available, we feel better with Snead versus those lefties than we would Bizzardo. So yeah, I think that's a good point, and like you said that. I think with Spire struggles because he was so good last year. He was so good at the beginning of this year. And so his rough May, I think, has really kind of threw the bullpen out of whack.
Yep.
So yeah, hopefully he can get going, because it started with Houston in Houston with, I think he walked like 3 guys.
Hmm.
His command kind of wavered for the next 4 or 5 outings. He's not walking guys nearly as much as he was, but now kind of the hits are falling in. But if you look at a Savant page, it's still very, very positive. So yeah, hopefully they can get Spire turned around quickly, because if they can, I think he fixes a lot of the issues that we are running into at the bullpen now. Because with Brash and Santos being down, Spire struggling, that was probably your 2, 3, fourth best relievers going into the season, and now you don't have them. So getting him up and going again, like I think everybody would expect, would definitely, I think, be a big boost to the bullpen. So hopefully he can turn it around here soon.
Yeah, 100%. And I really think that, it's terms like what's the quickest way to fix the bullpen? My answer would be like Gabe Spire, just
Yeah.
getting back to what we had from Gabe Spire, because that gives you, and then, to have Spire like what we saw in April just makes it so much easier to use Thornton and Stanek in roles. Now Thornton's kind of been in the Brash role. And I feel like I'm going on the bullpen for so long. The offense has been frustrating too. I think the bullpen is just such an interesting topic, because we thought it was just going to be this huge strength coming into the
Yeah.
year. And it's also, my last question I'll ask with it, it's a place where you can acquire guys fairly easily. We've already seen them acquire Mike Bauman.
Yep.
For anybody that's frustrated they haven't made a deal yet, I will say, like, it takes two to tango. I'm imagining other teams know the Mariners are desperate for relievers. So if you're calling the A's and going, hey, we want Lucas Ursag, or I know you mentioned Adams being hurt. I haven't followed up on that, but they're probably sitting there going, listen, you're desperate. We're going to make you pay $2.50 for a dollar. And you'll come back in July if you really need them that bad. So they're probably in a tough spot to make a trade. What's your thoughts on, obviously I think the fan base has agreed we need to add another reliever, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. It is that spot of the season where I think teams are just going to hold on to their guys unless you absolutely blow them away. Yeah, on Adams, I think it was like a neck issue, so I think he's fine. I don't think he went on the IL or anything, so nothing major. But yeah, hopefully as we get into like mid to late June, we start seeing prices get to a point where I think Dipoto and Hollander maybe feel comfortable pulling the trigger. Because I do think that even if Thornton, Spire, Saucedo, like, if Bauman kind of gets going, they still are going to need a reliever. So I'm sure they're working the phones. And as soon as the price gets to a spot where they feel like it's kind of commensurate to the value, they'll pull the trigger. But it probably is at least a month away, unfortunately. So yeah, guys in place have to kind of pick it up and get it going.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, if you could make a deal with the bullpen pitching a little better, you actually may have a better chance. But I do think teams are sitting there going like, yep, we'll wait you out, because we've seen you guys, you've got a 3-game lead. We've seen you blow some saves. So we'll wait it out. And I will say too, like, having a 3-game lead in the division, and I'm not trying to say, to anybody watching this, that like, oh, this is in the bag. They've got the AL West. They're 3 games up. But 3 games is a fairly significant margin to have a lead with. And I think it's going to buy them a good amount of time to, if they were 4 games back, I think you'd have to do it. I think you'd have to say, we'll pay $2.50 for the dollar. We need this reliever. We need this guy. Like, cause we're 4 games back of Houston and Texas right now. We can't afford to drop off. I do think being 3 games up gives them a little time to, and again, that lead could be gone by Wednesday for all we know. Hopefully not, but it could be. But I do think it affords you a little bit of time to try and get Spire right, to try and get Thornton, to get to Strand and Harrod runners, all these things. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree. Yeah, I think that it's not a big lead, but you are, out in front right now. So it does it buys you a little bit of time, I think, to kind of let those prices come back down. And yeah, so hopefully they can, when they play these teams head up, not give up too much ground. Because you're right. I think 3 games, as long as you play decent ball, it's hard for them to make up that ground where they're not playing you head up, unless they go on like a 7-8 game win streak, whatever it may be. They can kind of chip off a game here or there, but that's about it, assuming that you go and play even 500 baseball.
Yeah, even this series with the Astros, and we'll get into this series a little bit. I do want to go over the offense just for a couple minutes. I mean, I don't know if it was you that made the point on Twitter, or someone else, but like, even a split here. And again, I would love to sweep the Astros. I would love to take 3 out of 4, but it's the Astros that have the ground to make up. If you can come out of this 2-2, you're still 3 games up in the division, 3.5, 4 games up on them. Again, it buys you some time to makes to not have to rush to make these moves a little bit. So again, not that I don't want them to make it. I want them to add a reliever and get this bullpen right. And I'm not saying they should just wait to be 4 games back, but it does afford you, a little bit extra time. Last thing to talk about before we talk about the Astros series coming up a little bit. As always, guys, remember to hit that like button, comment your thoughts, and don't forget to hit subscribe as well if you are new here or you're just lurking. The offense, listen, I know it's Patrick Corbin. He's probably the worst starter in baseball. But the offense does come alive a little bit yesterday, Sunday. Julio Rodriguez has probably his best game of the year. Ty France is actually had a pretty solid road trip. Thoughts on the offense? Are we finally coming out of it? Was it just Patrick Corbin? Where are you at since the last time we talked about the offense?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, it was Patrick Corbin, but I do think on that front there are positive signs, like Julio, 2 really good games in a row. Even a lot of his outs have been pulled fly balls that have been hit pretty deep, so that's encouraging. Ty France is, he's looking at since 415, which goes back to that Cincinnati series. He's got a 106 WRC plus, but he has 6 home runs, so that's over 37 games. So over a 162 season, that's like a 25 home run pace for him, which is good. His batting average isn't where you'd want it to be. JP, I thought, has looked like JP Crawford since he's gotten back, which is big. Rojas, Rayleigh, Canzone have kind of slowed down, which is to be expected. But I mean, really, if you can get Julio going, it makes this offense so much different. And yeah, Dylan Moore continues to hit the ball and swing it really well. So yeah, I feel like there's some positive signs and pockets of the lineup, but yeah, we need to see it for, definitely a longer stretch of time. But most importantly, I think Julio is hopefully showing signs that his timing or, whatever that issue was is, perhaps in the past, and we'll start seeing a more consistent Julio. That's kind of the superstar that we've seen him be for 2 years. So I think that's what's most encouraging is getting him going. And yeah, if France is starting to barrel the ball again. So, if he can kind of keep those strikeouts in check, hopefully he can be kind of a catalyst as well.
Yeah, Ty France 2024, I can just not figure out for the life of me. The April with the all red Savant, and I was like, be patient. Then, the Savant page turns blue and he's still struggling. And now he's hitting. I'm just going to hope he turns it on and we get 2022 Ty France. I don't care what the Savant page looks like anymore. Just be good and keep delivering. I'm with you 100% on Julio. A couple roster moves I want to get your thoughts on. It sounds like Ryan Bliss is up with the taxi squad. It sounds like they haven't put Polanco on the IL yet. We've gone back and forth on this a few times with our frustration from this road trip where they pretty much played a man down by allowing Polanco to stay active. And I get it. I'm sure they thought he'd be back sooner than he was. And then Dylan Moore was swinging the bat really well. So I get it. I don't want to see that again. I think you're in the boat there. And then also your thoughts on the move to option Urias and bring up Clase. Your take on both of those.
Yeah, so just about 30 seconds ago, that Polanco was placed on the IL. Ryan Bliss officially called up. So I think that's good news because, I mean, Polanco looks like he hurt his hamstring again. So I'm like, did they kind of rush him back? And so that kind of goes back to the roster move decisions where it makes me scratch my head like, what are we doing here? So glad that they're going to put him on the IL, let his hamstring get healed up. I'm excited to see Ryan Bliss. He's got like a very interesting power and speed combo. You never know how a rookie is going to adapt to MLB pitching. So it could go really, really bad and he could look lost, or, sometimes these guys come up and they don't miss a beat. So excited to see what he does. I'm sure he'll play a lot against lefties. I have not looked into it, but from what I've heard from others, he has ran like a reverse split in the minors. So I'll be curious to see what they do. Cause he is one of their better prospects, at least top 10 to 15. And so typically you don't want to let them come up and sit on the bench too often. So I think there's ways they can play him against righties as well. So excited to see what he does. And then Clase, another move I don't really understand. From what I've read, I didn't follow him that close in the minors, but I think he started switch hitting a couple years ago. From the left side was his natural side. He hasn't hit lefties very well in the minors, kind of from what I've been told. Once again, haven't looked at the numbers. So I'm just kind of like, you bring him up to be a platoon bat versus lefties. It's not even a strong side. So I just don't really get that one either. I would like to see somebody like I mentioned it today, Nick Solak, who's in Tacoma swinging it well. I think he's got like a 117 WRC plus in his career against lefties. He's hit him very, very well. He's swinging it well in Tacoma, plays left field. So in my mind, he would have been a better bet than Class A. I also think it would have been okay to put Urias back in his platoon role. He did, fairly well. His batting average wasn't good, but he was drawing walks and hitting for power. And then I think he got overexposed. I also understand the thought process of sending him down, getting them consistent at bats, and to seeing if you can get like the 20, 22 and 21 and 22 Luis Urias back, because at like age 23, 24, he's really, really good. But it looks like they're going to keep rolling with Clase versus lefties. I don't know that Solak would have done much better. It's just one of those ones where you don't have a ton of good options there, and he does offer some athleticism, but I do think there was, probably a move that would have likely yielded better results. So yeah, but very, very curious to see how Ryan Bliss does. I'm excited to watch him hopefully tonight.
Yeah, we should see him in the line. I'm assuming you'll have Dylan Moore at third and Bliss
Yep.
at second tonight versus Framber Valdez. And yeah, I'm with you. Just kind of very puzzling all around. And I'm glad you mentioned, because I mentioned on my show, I think every point you brought up, I mentioned with Urias. Like, I would have liked to see them just kind of put him back in his platoon role. I said the same thing. I think he got a little overexposed, faced a lot of righties with Polanco being out. Would have liked to see them kind of ease him back into the platoon role and then see what happens from there.
Yep.
But again, I'm not against the move. I get it. And Dylan Moore's been so red hot that like I get wanting him in almost every day, which I think they've done as well. So I'm fine with it. Class A, like again, just kind of a puzzling move. Solak would be interesting. I know Cade Marlowe, I think, is a better hitter from the left side, but he offers good defense. And it's like with Class A, if he struggles and you sit him for a week, I don't want that. I want Class A playing every day. If you bring up Solak and Cade Marlowe and play them once every 5 days, I don't really care if they're not getting at bats. So just kind of a puzzling decision. I can understand sending Urias down. I just thought Class A was a weird option. And I thought we might actually see something like Class A option Solak or Marlowe brought up today, but I guess we won't. But yeah, excited to see Ryan Bliss. I'm with you. I think you'll see him for sure against lefties, and then occasionally I think against righties. But like you said, he's a legit enough prospect, that you're not going to bring him up to be what Rivas did, where he played once, over the course of a month, essentially. So I'm excited to see it. Mariners begin a big series tonight, a 4-game homestand against the Houston Astros as they continue their 17 games in 17 days. Mariners will throw righty Bryce Miller on the mound against Framber Valdez. Valdez is actually a really good pitcher that the Mariners have had some success against. They've actually done a good job. Maybe, I don't know, what his ERA is against the Mariners, but they seem to have good at bats against him, worked the count. And a couple weeks ago in Houston, chased him from the game and ended up beating the Astros with the gem from Logan Gilbert. Your thoughts on the upcoming series against Houston?
Yeah, I think it's a big one. They've played a lot better lately. I think they won 6 or 7 in a row within the last couple of weeks. I think they're 4-4 in their last 8, so they've cooled off a lot. But yeah, they're sitting 3.5 behind us. I think they were 7 or 8 behind us at one point a couple of weeks ago. So they're coming into it, right? It's a big, big opportunity for them to chop off all that lead, or a couple games, whatever it may be. So that's where kind of my mindset is, even a split keeps him at bay. And if you go take 3 or 4 from him, you put him, close to 6 games back. So, and I think there's a good opportunity. I know we face Valdez tonight, who's a good pitcher, Verlander in game 4, who's always given us fits. But game 2, we were supposed to face Christian Javier. I think he had forearm issues in his bullpen. So likely will be Hunter Brown now, who hasn't thrown well. And I think he was maybe supposed to throw game 3, and now it's looking like it might be Eric Lauer, who they just signed. So game 2, game 3, you have a very, very significant pitching advantage. So yeah, I think if you can take tonight, you're set up very, very well to potentially take 3 or 4 from them. So yeah, it's a big series, a big early season series, and hopefully we can take 3 or 4 and really continue what we did yesterday with the bats and carry it over to this week. So hopefully our pitching. I thought on the road trip, we didn't strike out many guys. It seemed to be kind of a struggle for a lot of them and a lot of the starts. Hopefully they get back home and we kind of start seeing the rotation be dominant again. And also obviously the bullpen getting things straightened out. But yeah, Astros are playing well. They're a very good roster. They can hit it. So it'll be certainly be a challenge, and they're desperate as well, which can be challenging at times.
Yeah, and this, like I said, this is a big series for Houston. They've struggled, but they haven't been buried. And I guarantee you, they're looking at this series going, listen, we can go into Seattle, take 3 out of 4. Now we're right there in the pile with them in
Yep.
Texas to win this division with 104 games left to go. Last time the Mariners faced the Astros, remember Houston was very aggressive, which makes
Mhm.
sense. The Mariners throw a ton of strikes. And I wonder if that's some of the low strikeout totals. You're just seeing teams be very aggressive against the Mariners right now because you're not going to draw a lot of walks. So they're just trying to jump on fastballs early. Obviously, Bryce Miller going tonight. You're going to get a lot of fastballs. Miller hasn't looked great his last few outings. Now, his start against the Yankees was kind of weird because he wasn't great, but he also gave up home runs to Soto and Judge. I mean, any pitcher can give up home runs to those guys. So for the rest of the game, he did pretty well. I think the Astros are also expected to bring Jose Abreu back today.
Yep.
Now, this is going to come back to bite me, but that should be good news for the Mariners. I'm sure Abreu's going to hit 2 home runs tonight after saying that. But yeah, I think you got to look at this like the pressure is kind of on Houston a little bit. Like you said, if you can win tonight, I think that is so huge because Verlander, I can't remember the last time the Mariners, well, they beat Verlander a couple years ago. They had like 4 home runs or something in
Yeah.
2022. And they actually beat up on him in the playoff game, oddly enough. But
Yep.
if you can win tonight, like you said, then the next 2 you feel like you've got a really good advantage. And if you can exit this series with a split, again, Houston leaves right where they started. Is that or have you buried them? Of course not. I don't even know if a sweep necessarily buries them, but you've played them then 7 times and you've gone 4-3 against them. You've got the tiebreaker if it comes down to that at the moment. And you haven't allowed them to get that big series win against you to really pull themselves back in. So I'm looking forward to the series. I always love these. They're stressful, but this is what we want. This is what we want the Mariners to be playing, is these critical series against teams like this. This is how you become a division champion and a World Series champion.
Yep, agreed. Now, so Houston just set their rotation for the series. So it's Framber tonight, Hunter Brown tomorrow is expected. They've moved Verlander up to Wednesday for Game 3, and then Thursday is Spencer Arrighetti. So we won't face Lauer, which I think is good. He's a lefty, so just one lefty will face this series. And then looks like the Mariners lineup is out. Yeah, Bliss is hitting 8, playing second, and Clase's in left field, and the rest of the lineup is what you'd expect essentially against a lefty.
Gotcha. Okay, good to see Bliss in there. Hopefully Clase can do something against Framber. But yeah, I mean, listen, I think the Mariners have the pitching matchup advantage in at least, because tonight's going to be Miller versus Valdez. Tomorrow then is Hunter Brown versus Castillo. You got to feel pretty good there. Wednesday will then be Verlander against Kirby.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, I think you actually probably do have the advantage there. I know that might be crazy to say, but I mean, I do think at this stage in there, Verlander hasn't been lights out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this year. He's pitching much more like his age a little bit. Now, I will never, ever assume you're going to beat Justin Verlander. That guy is still like the fine wine. I still expect him to shut us down, but I think you can beat him. And then Arrighetti against
Gilbert.
Logan. So,
Yep.
I mean, outside of tonight, and the Mariners have hit Valdez pretty well, and Miller's had some success, I think, against Houston. So we'll see what happens, and good to see Bliss in the lineup. Any final thoughts on the Mariners before we head out of here?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we're at that third of the way through the season. So to the point now where, yeah, I feel good about the rotation. I think the lineup, I felt good about it going into the year, but we're getting to the point now where there's a lot of question marks. So, particularly I think Polanco, I just don't have a ton of faith in. I think Garver's kind of shown it in spurts. Like in New York, he was so close to 3 home runs. He took 2 walks yesterday. Over the last month, he's been pretty close to league average. I still have some hopes that he can get going, but yeah, I mean, we really need to see more consistent offense moving forward in the bullpen, kind of tightening things up in the back end outside of Munoz. And if they can do that, I think we're going to be in a really good spot. But yeah, the AL West is looking, and I think this is important to remember that while we're flawed, Houston is very flawed as well, especially, Javier forearm issues. I think Jose or Urquidy, or I don't know how you pronounce his name, he was supposed to start this week. He left his last rehab outing. So their rotation's not getting shored up anytime soon. And then Texas too, they're kind of the same boat. I think that, John Gray just went on the IL. Their lineup's nothing like it was last year. So we're not the only flawed team in the division. Texas and Houston have just as many flaws, if not more, and we're kind of in the catbird seat. So, but yeah, I'm just hoping that we can see the lineup moving closer to what was expected moving forward. And like I said, if they do, I like our chances to win the division, but we're a third of the way through the season. So things really do need to improve here quickly. And if not, well, I think regardless, it's going to be an interesting trade deadline. But like we've talked about on prior shows, there's only so much you can add. So we do need to see internal developments, or there will be, flaws that are significant even post trade deadline.
Yeah, and listen, I wouldn't be shocked if Jerry and Justin did go out and get multiple tools,
Mm-hmm.
and I could actually see some where they really do a fairly significant roster churn
Yep.
at the deadline. But right now, until that happens, the current players have just got to be better, and they should. Their track record indicates that. A big thing, Julio, what we just talked about a couple minutes ago, that would go a long, long way to
Yes.
this offense really taking off. Would be Julio getting going. Maybe Ryan Bliss can provide a spark. And I'm with you on Garver, and then Haniger, the other one. If we can get Mitch
Yeah.
going just a little bit, now that he's kind of back into a bit of a platoon role here. And we'll see. Well, now only one lefty going. So we'll see Haniger, I'm sure, tonight for sure. And yeah, listen, there's been a lot of frustrating aspects to this season. The record isn't quite where I'd like it to be. They've played a tough schedule and they have a 3-game lead. And to your point, the rest of the AL West is flawed as well. And it's, I see a lot of people tell me, oh, Jay, the Mariners, they're not going to win the division because Texas and Houston are going to get it right and come up. Well, why do the Mariners get criticized for losing these games, but Texas and Houston get like this pat? And I know they were both in the playoffs last year. So I'm not trying to sound like I get people's frustrations, but it's kind of like, well, Texas and Houston are scuffling more than the Mariners right now. So,
Yep.
maybe it's the Mariners that are going to get hot as well. So, I mean, that's a possibility too, that those teams have to look at. So, that's kind of where I'm at. So that will wrap it up. Thank you everybody for watching. Like I said, remember to hit that like button. It helps out tremendously. Comment your thoughts on the team down below. Don't forget to hit subscribe. We will be back next week. Again, if you want to join me for a post game, man, just hit me up. We can do that, especially this series, a very polarizing series. So appreciate you joining me as always, my friend, and enjoy this series. Should be a fun one.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to next week.
Same. Take it easy, everybody. Have a great day and go Mariners.